Hello, I'm Sandra Murray of the White Mountain Community Garden here in the heart of Show Low, Arizona. Welcome to AZ Mountain Gardening. Well, it's winter up here in the White Mountains, so not a lot of things growing except here in our high tunnel. This episode, we're going to visit Reevis Mountain Ranch. One of our garden members, Nancy Neff, made a visit there and did an internship. So let's see what's going on at Reevis Mountain.
Hi, I'm Nancy Neff. I am with the community garden in Show Low here. Well, I joined the community garden. Jan Mathis introduced me, I guess like at least 4 or 5 years ago. And she was teaching a class in Holbrook, so I took the Master Gardener class with Jan in Holbrook and joined the garden and been here ever since. It's a great place. So last October, we did a field trip. 4 of us went to Reevis Mountain Sustainable School, and I was so impressed with the work that they were doing there. Reevis has been there for 38 years, so they've had a long time to build up their soil and learn how to grow the plants, and they were just doing an awesome job, which you'll see in the pictures that we have. And I thought, you know, this would be great because I can come down here for a couple months in the winter, get out of the cold, and be an intern and learn. It's in right by Roosevelt Lake. It's in Roosevelt, Arizona. It's about 6.5 miles. Well, it's a little farther off the main road, totally off the grid. And they produce their own electricity. They get water from the stream that comes through from the water and from the mountain, and they filter that water with filters with charcoal and with colloidal silver. So you can only drink the water in the kitchen because the weather, you know, they do have a beautiful bathhouse, but you can't drink that water. You have to filter the water. It's really an experience, a good learning experience. I had a great time. And when I was there was only 1 intern there when I got, and then 2 more eventually came, so there were 4 of us, and we divided up the work. So we had to open the chickens in the morning and feed them, and you know, the roosters, of course, let us know. But as soon as it was light, we went out and opened up the chickens, and then we opened the greenhouse, and we had to do the watering every day. So there's 7 rows in the orchard. We would water the orchard, and 1 row every day. And then we'd water the garden. There were 5 rows in the garden, and we'd water each one for 15 minutes. I had my own little cabin, which was, I don't even know, maybe it was 8 by 10. Just had a bed on one end and a little space in it, but it did have a little propane heater, so I never got really cold. You know, it was just perfect. I was glad I didn't have to live in a tent. We had an outhouse. We had several outhouses. So, you know, we didn't have any flush toilets, which was fine. It was just, you know, a little primitive. The other interns that were there, I'm like a little old now, but they were 18 and 24, so it was easy for them. Peter, of course, is 75, so he said, or 76, I think, he said it was nice to have someone his own age around, which was kind of nice, you know. But Peter did a lot of different things, did a lot of traveling, and he wanted a place to settle down, and he looked for a long time, and he finally found this place and looked up the owner because it wasn't actually for sale, and convinced him that, and then he found some friends, and he got the financing set up and just got started. The place it's 13, maybe 13 and a half acres. It's all fenced because in the beginning they had, trouble with the cows coming in and eating the garden. They have the garden fenced separately, but they do have the whole place fenced because they have over 100 fruit trees, so they have to try and keep things out. The javelinas come in, and Peter's talking about possibly fencing the orchard next, but putting a low fence, just enough to keep the javelinas out. So, but he has a lot of peaches. I think he has 18 peach trees and he has a good income from the orchard. So, but his biggest income comes from the tinctures. Peter Bigfoot is famous for his trek across the desert, which I think it was 80 some miles, and I think it took him 18 days, and he went across a lower desert and then up into the mountains. And he didn't take any water, or he took bottles to collect water, but he didn't take any water or any food with him. He just foraged for everything. And he showed us the slideshow from that, and it was pretty amazing. The first couple days were the hardest because he started out down in the low desert, and he had an amazing story to tell. So that's really what he's famous for. Oh, this was before he even started Reevis. This was back in the 70s, I think. Yeah. So, but everybody who knows Peter, everybody loves Peter. He's just wonderful.
Well, let's see. Would you like to look at the garden? So this was a lettuce row here, and we harvested a lot of it, and then the cold weather moved in, and it's kind of been stunted ever since. So anyway, this is a practice that I've been doing for a while, and it works pretty well for me. And then as I just plant, like here, I just had, about 3 feet. I seeded it fairly heavily, and then when the little sprouts came up, and they get about that big, then I transplant them out. And that way, while they're germinating and getting to be this big, I could get out there with the rototiller and the hoe and whatever and prepare the soil that I'm going to put them in, try to get ahead of the weeds. And then once I got soil prep for them and get ahead of the weeds, then I transplant them out. And that seems to work pretty good. Otherwise, if I put a seed over there and one there and one there, then I would have to keep that weeded by hand the whole time I'm waiting for those little guys to come up. And so this way, I do all the weeding when there's nothing in it and hoeing, and then I transplant the little ones out from it. So we got parsley over here. Parsley is really, really good for your kidneys and a lot of other things, and it's just delicious to eat. I love it. And then over here, this is the red clover patch. I've got a lot of weeds growing in it right now. The clover's kind of dormant. This is the clover here. And the clover, we use the clover blossoms for a tea. It's a really good blood cleanser and anti-cancer type thing. And then the calendula flowers I use for making my healing salve. It heals wounds really nicely. Yes?
This is the cheeseweed.
That's a cheeseweed, yeah.
That's a cheeseweed with the...
Yeah, we were going to cut up that root, but
I know.
we didn't get a whole lot of that done yesterday. But that's a cheeseweed root. And we would cut this up in little short segments, dry it, and then use it as a tea medicinally. And it's also good for gum diseases. And also it's soothing to our kidneys.
So it's better to dry it? You don't use it when it's freshly out of the ground?
If I'm going to make a tea out of something, it's much better to have it dry, because when it's dry,
It concentrates
and you get osmosis. But as you see, if it's wet, it has its own water, and you put it in the water and nothing happens.
Okay.
But you see, if it's concentrated and you put it in the water, it bleeds out into the water immediately.
Okay.
Yeah. So then, so here we got leeks. And the leeks, you plant them in a trench and gradually fill in the trench and heap the dirt up around them, because it makes more of the edible portion. You don't use the tops of leeks very much. It's mostly the white bulbs, you know, the bulbous bottoms of them. So if you bury them, you keep getting more and more of the white edible part. Get rid of the green part. Mm-hmm. There's an interesting thing going on with that beet patch. Now sometimes I get seeds mixed up with the chard because they all look the same. And then I planted it about 3 times in the summertime. It was just too hot for them or something, I guess. And then, so eventually I got the whole thing fixed. And in this row here, I had really good beets. And then on that side over there, and I was just wondering, the beets are, I mean, the tops look real healthy, but there's not much on the bottom. And I was just wondering if maybe it was just a different astrological sign that I planted them on that made that difference. But something going on there. But I used.
So do you follow that lunar calendar when you're planting?
Sometimes. Yeah, I like to, not as close to the calendar as I should, but what I do is I try to plant my above ground plants on the half moon rising, right around in there, usually pretty good. Maybe not to the day, you know, but it's probably close enough. And then I plant root crops about a half moon, descending moon. So, and that seems to work out right when I do it. And I don't always pull it off. But I pretty much have bad luck with plants if I plant the above ground plants on a descending moon. Doesn't seem to work out very good. And this over here is the Peppermint Patch, but right now the peppermint, which we use for tea a lot, has a lot of medicinal qualities to it. It's right now growing more chickweed than it is mint.
Isn't mint supposed to like take over your whole...
When the summer comes, it'll fend for itself, I think, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but right now I'm not too worried about it because it's pretty much dormant right now. And I think it's getting invaded. This is spearmint, isn't it?
It smells like wriggly spearmint.
That's what it is. This is spearmint, and it's starting to invade the peppermint.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't mint very water heavy?
Mint is pretty wild stuff. And I've thrown a lot of it in the creek so that it grows in the creek also. So I can always replenish. I can always replenish if this thing goes bad from the stuff I put in the creek.
We don't have any creeks.
Yeah, I don't have enough creeks for everybody. Yeah. So, but anyway, the peppermint that I had, I got it from a peppermint farm in Maupin, Oregon. They had like 40 acres of peppermint. It was just amazing. I went out and laid in it for a little while. I didn't get shot at or anything. And then I dug up a clump of it and brought it home. And I planted it here in the garden, and it flourished really nicely. And then I put it in a creek too. And all of getting around the world. Mm-hmm. Oh, here's a nice patch of that gill. And it's probably, you know, the gill is, yeah, that one would be turnips.
Oh, turnips. Oh, turnip greens are delicious.
Oh yeah, I love turnips.
Yeah, right.
There are so many plants that just like to grow around humans. And it's almost like God saying, here, eat this, it's good for you, and puts it right in your lawn, like dandelions, for instance. One of the most precious herbs there is. It's even good against diabetes and just all kinds of things. It's good for you, for your liver and your heart and your kidneys and the whole deal. And you make a tea from the roots especially, and you can also put the tops in with them. The tops usually I'd eat for salad, and it's very healthful stuff to eat. Then there's wild lettuce that grows, like I think that's some right there. And that grows in your garden or in your yard by accident. Just happens. I mean, it shows up, you know. And so by that, I see so many plants that, like the cheeseweed, such a precious plant, you know, really good for us. And it likes to grow around people. It doesn't grow anywhere else. I call it a people plant. And it doesn't just grow wild out in the desert, it grows where people hang out. So gill, I was just thinking that gill shows up around our gardens like chickweed does, and I know chickweed's real good for us. And so I should probably start learning to use gill because it's probably just what we need. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you were starting to ask a question.
Now I forget it. Wait a minute.
Oh, well, when you remember.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'll have questions.
Yeah.
I don't know what anybody wants to know until they ask, so.
We're at that age.
What do we need? We need a dandelion.
Dandelion,
Oh,
dandelion, lots of dandelions. You can eat the leaves, you can eat the flowers, you can eat the stalk, the flower stalks. I was watching a grizzly bear up in Alaska not too long ago, out in the field grazing, and I went out to see what the heck he's eating. And so the dandelions, you know, they make that yellow flower on a stalk, right? And then it turns to the little white puffball thing. And then the stems, I don't know about here in Arizona, but the stems, the one the grizzly bear was eating, were very tasty. Yeah, so I started eating them myself.
Is
They're
it
pretty good.
after? So you eat the stem after it's flowered? And
Yeah, but you can eat the stem all the time. Every part of the dandelion is good for us. Yeah,
Okay, well,
not just good for us, but very good for us. And if you harvest the roots of them and you make tea out of it, it would be a substitute for coffee. It doesn't have the stimulating effect, but it's a tonic for all your yin organs. It's a great tonic for your liver and kidneys and stuff.
Good diuretic.
Yeah, the leaves are more diuretic than the roots, but they're both really good for you. And there it is for the soda pop drinkers that are dying of diabetes. Should be drinking dandelion root and they cure themselves.
What about dandelion wine
You make that from the flowers.
from the yellow?
Okay, I'd go for that.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be fun, but once again, our bodies don't do well with alcohol at all. It really tears us up. And for beer drinkers, you know, it makes a fat on our bodies that you just can't get rid of. And then it messes up your liver, it messes up your brains. But probably the safest drink out there, if you just want a cold bubbly, is non-alcoholic beer. Because the only thing wrong with beer is the alcohol. And otherwise, it's just fermented grain. There's no chemicals, there's no sugar, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a nice drink. Wine's got the alcohol. Now, if you could get non-alcoholic wine, it would be kind of okay, except that now you're dealing with sugar again.
Yeah, it's too sweet.
And sugar and yeast, and those are two, you know, very detrimental things. Now, wine has, you know, red wine has some elements in it that are good for you, but it also has, I'm not sure it outweighs the bad part. Yeah. So that's what I say about that. So I think of it as, usually if I go out with somebody and they want to have some wine, I just consider it grape concentrate. I just add a whole lot of water to it. and then it tastes a whole lot better to me. Otherwise it's just too strong and your brain don't. Right away you drink a little and your brain goes fuzzy. So it makes you say and do stupid things. I heard a saying not too long ago that's really is something that we should repeat to ourselves every once in a while. And it just says, don't do something permanently stupid because you're temporarily upset. That's a good reminder, you know. Don't do something permanently stupid because you're temporarily upset. Yeah, that's a good reminder, huh? Okay, let's go for a walk. So we got more kale, and all of the kales came from the little patch over there where I only planted 3 feet, and then transplanted it out. And we got the onions, and these here are kind of bunching onion, so you use them for scallions like. But you dig them, I dig them up, take the clump apart, and then take one of the better looking ones and stick it back in the ground, and it just starts making little onions again. And so here's the lettuce that's been frozen quite a few times, and it's just coming back again. Yeah. The leaves look a little bit squirrely, you know, so when I'm a little bit hesitant to take it to the restaurants to sell because of appearance, but when you bite into it and taste it, it seems nice and sweet, or better than usual.
No, it's what kind of lettuce is it?
This one here is romaine, and the one on the other side is partly green ice and partly romaine. And one of the things I wanted you to notice was that I had this habit of, once I nourish the soil and then I plant plants in it, then I put manure just in a row down the center to help keep down the weeds, but also the worms get up in it and start dragging it down into the ground. And it keeps the moisture in, and especially in the winter time, it has a tendency to warm the ground up a little.
I thought it was to like run off the,
Yeah, it runs off the manure and onto the roots of the plant. Oh, that'd be a good one. And that's another fun dimension to gardening when you start learning to use the weeds as well.
And the thing that I really enjoyed most about about my daily routine at Reevis is we would get up and get the fire started in the main house, so we had a warm morning, and then we'd take turns making breakfast. And then after breakfast, we would have a metaphysical reading of some sort, and we'd also read from Peter's book. We'd read about an organ, the heart or the lungs or the liver, and just repetition. And then we would do a metaphysical reading, and mostly we read like Conversations with God, The Gods of Eden, different books, and I mean it was and then we'd talk about it, and I learned a lot. It was really nice. And then we did, out of Peter's book, the Remedies for Natural Healing, we did the acupressure, which is a really healing way. I learned a lot about that. That was good. Yes, I made tinctures. I took notes. I learned how Peter does that and how he gathers. And the last week that I was there, we went out and gathered no, not all of it. We would go. He went to the grocery store, and like we used onions every day, so we had to buy onions because we didn't have enough. But he raised the most delicious sweet potatoes, awesome sweet potatoes. We had sweet potatoes until we ran out. Had them almost every day, and we had kale and Swiss chard. Oh yeah, the greens. And every meal consisted of 4 things. We would have a grain, a green of some sort, a protein, and a root vegetable. So we'd have carrots and sweet potatoes and rutabagas and turnips. It was all, and we'd just go out in the garden and pick it, right before we were ready to eat. So everything was fresh. It was just amazing, amazing. You had to get used to not having your phone, not being tied to that. And in the beginning, I helped Peter in the office, so I was still on the computer, but nobody could call me. I didn't have to worry about answering my phone, although I carried my phone around so I could take pictures. But yeah, it was awesome getting untied to the electronic world. And, you know, no news. It was great.
Well, that was a great show here on Reevis Mountain Ranch. Please join us here at the garden. We welcome new members all the time. You can check out our webpage. Also, like us on Facebook. There's a lot to like. Please join us anytime here in the garden. See you next time.